In the beginning, there was the Nile. It pulsed like a quiet heartbeat through the sun-baked land. The river was more than water. It was time itself, rising, falling, returning, a slow breath of the divine. In this ancient world of gods, granite and gold, love, too, found its place. The Egyptians believed in Mat, the harmony of the cosmos, the balance of all things. And within that divine order, love had a sacred role. It was not a fleeting whim. It was a presence, steady, ritualized, whispered between the lines of ink on papyrus. Today, we journey into this still painted world, where affection was not shouted, but gently spoken, where emotions were etched into eternity through hieroglyphs, carved into limestone walls, and brushed onto woven scrolls, and where love letters, though few in number, carry the weight of centuries of longing. Let us walk slowly now, as though beneath the shade of date palms, and listen to voices that drift across time. We begin in a place not far from the royal tombs, Deir el Medina, a workers' village nestled into the cliffs of western Thebes. This was no ordinary village. It was home to the artisans and scribes who carved and painted the eternal resting places of pharaohs. Their hands shaped the underworld with pigments and prayers. But in their spare hours, in moments between shifts, they wrote. They wrote letters, contracts, love songs, jokes, and dreams. They etched their thoughts onto shards of limestone and pottery called ostraka. These fragments, like fallen leaves, preserved whispers of daily life. Among them, we find pieces of the heart. Consider one of the most beloved collections of love poetry, known today as the Chester Beatty Papyrus I, a compilation of romantic verses likely copied by a scribe in Deir el Medina, sometime around 1200 BCE. Here, in careful ink strokes, a young voice speaks. I was simply off to see Nephris, my friend, just to sit and chat at her place, when there he was, standing by the doorway, the one with the curling locks, the one with the dazzling eyes. It is a poem, yes, but also a confession, a diary entry, a moment suspended in ink. Egyptian love poetry from this period often reads like a quiet breeze, light, warm, full of fragrance. The voices are personal, not mythic. They speak of sneaking glances, the thrill of being seen, the ache of absence. 7 days since I saw my love, and sickness has crept into me. This is not the love of conquest or ceremony. It is longing in its purest form. In ancient Egypt, the body was not separate from the soul. It was a vessel of the divine, worthy of adornment and praise. So it is no surprise that Egyptian love poems are sensual, but never crude. They speak of perfume, of lotus blossoms, of the nape of the neck. The beloved is compared to stars, to falcons, to sycamores. The language is thick with metaphor, soft as silk. A woman writes, my heart flutters hastily. When I think of my love for you, it lets me not act sensibly. It leaps from its place. There is sincerity here, vulnerability, and a rhythm that echoes the pulse of the Nile itself. Poetry gives us the dream, but what of the daily reality? Let us pause and read a real letter. This one, written by a man named Hamun, a scribe who lived during the collapse of the New Kingdom. His life was difficult, his world uncertain. Yet his words, preserved on a thin scrap of papyrus, speak with simplicity. To the lady of the house, may you live in health. I greet you 1,000 times, with every breath I take. He writes of missing her. of wishing to see her again, of hoping that her household is in good order. It is a quiet letter, formal, perhaps, but deeply human. In these moments, we are reminded, the ancients were not abstractions. They lived, worried, loved. They waited for replies. They smiled when a letter arrived. Love in ancient Egypt was not merely a matter of the heart. It was also a matter of the gods. The goddess Hathor, she of music and dance, was the patron of lovers. She was often shown as a cow with solar discs between her horns, gentle, radiant, ever beautiful. Lovers might visit her temples to pray, to leave tokens, or to seek blessings. A young man, perhaps trembling, might offer a garland of papyrus reeds, or a mirror polished from bronze. A girl might whisper a prayer to Hathor under the full moon. Even the great god Thoth, master of writing and knowledge, had his role. For what is a letter but a sacred act of communication? To write was to summon eternity. To inscribe love was to hope that the emotion might last beyond death, and perhaps, in the realm of Osiris, be felt again. Imagine a scene. A girl sits in a courtyard at dusk. The stone walls around her are warm from the sun. She holds a scroll in her lap, not a royal edict or a prayer, but a letter. She opens it slowly. The scent of myrrh lingers faintly. The ink is dark, fresh, the handwriting familiar. The letter says little. A greeting, a wish for her well-being, a line of affection. But she reads it again, and again. She touches the edge of the papyrus to her lips and smiles. That smile has not changed in 5,000 years. Many of the most eloquent writers were trained scribes, men mostly, though women could and did write. They learned in temple schools, copying out lists and prayers. But when their hands moved from formula to feeling, their skill became something else entirely. One scribe wrote, "Write to me quickly. Do not delay. My heart is not still when you are silent." Such lines remind us of modern text messages, emails, or phone calls. The urgency of contact, the hunger for reply, is timeless. But what of the letters that never came? Not every story was joyful. There were separations, from duty, from illness, from death. Archaeologists have found letters to the dead, written by grieving lovers or spouses, asking for protection, or simply expressing sorrow. These were buried at tombs or burned with offerings. Even in death, communication continued. One such letter reads, "You left me, and I was not ready. My house is quiet. My heart lies heavy." The ancients did not believe love ended with death. They believed in reunion, and in the field of reeds, the paradise beyond, the beloved would be seen again. Such beliefs wrapped loss in a veil of hope. One of the most enduring examples of eternal love lies not in a letter, but on a tomb. The tomb of Ka and Merit, discovered near Deir al-Medina, held the remains of a high-ranking architect and his beloved wife. Their burial was untouched, their possessions, their bed, even her cosmetics preserved. They had lived side by side in life, and were laid to rest the same way. Inside the tomb, on painted walls, Ka is shown holding Merit's hand. She stands behind him, as was customary, but close, always close. There is no text, no letter, only the image of a couple, together for eternity. So much has been lost. Floods, fire, the slow crumbling of time, all have taken their toll on the fragile scrolls of ancient Egypt. What remains is but a sliver of what once was. But even in fragments, their voices linger. A line here, a poem there. A love letter, perhaps, once folded carefully, carried under a robe, read in secret beneath a moonlit sky. We read these remnants now with reverence, with wonder, and perhaps with a touch of envy, for in their simplicity lies something we yearn for still, to love and to be loved across the span of time. And so we leave the desert sands and return from the land of ink and empire. But the words remain. Always they remain. The sound of distant footsteps over marble, the chirp of cicadas in a hot Italian afternoon, quill against wax, soft scratching in a quiet room. A whisper begins. Before the empire was made of marble, before its legions thundered across 3 continents, there were words delicate, private, and filled with longing. This is not the Rome of war or glory. This is the Rome of gardens and letters, of stolen glances in porticos, of promises murmured in candlelight, and vows sealed not with iron, but with ink. In this chapter, we step away from the Senate and the battlefield. We retreat into the shaded atria of Roman villas, to sit beside lovers and poets, wives and husbands, slaves and nobles, and listen to the quiet language of affection, as it once echoed across the empire. The Romans were prodigious letter writers. To them, writing was not just communication, it was presence. A letter was a surrogate self, carrying emotion, humor, wisdom, or desire across miles and days. They used papyrus rolls, imported from Egypt, or thin wooden tablets coated with wax, ideal for shorter, more ephemeral notes. A stylus scratched messages into the wax, and when the writing was no longer needed, the surface could be smoothed and reused, like thoughts whispered into the wind. But not all letters were meant to fade. Some were copied and preserved. Others were carved into stone or written on parchment with great care. And some, surprisingly, have survived to this day, delicate, worn, and still alive with feeling. Let us begin, not in Rome, but at the edge of the empire in northern Britain, where the Vindolanda tablets were discovered buried in the cold earth near Hadrian's Wall. One such letter is among the oldest surviving examples of Latin written by a woman. It is an invitation to a birthday party, penned by Claudia Severa, the wife of a Roman officer, to her friend Sulpicia Lepidina. I shall be expecting you, sister. Be well, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to be well. It is not a love letter in the romantic sense, but the affection between friends, the warm formality, speaks volumes. The tone is gentle, the phrasing intimate. It shows us that love in Roman times took many forms. Friendship, loyalty, and companionship were all honored. Of all Roman writers, perhaps none captured the spirit of romantic love better than Ovid, poet of mischief, pleasure, and passion. His work Amoris is filled with playful, seductive letters to imaginary mistresses. His later work, Heroids, imagines letters from abandoned women of myth, Penelope to Odysseus, Dido to Aeneas, each one aching with eloquence. But beyond literary games, Ovid gave voice to the yearning that binds all ages. If you're not with me, I hold your letters to my lips and pretend they are your kiss. Though often tongue-in-cheek, Ovid's verses contain deep truths, the power of written words to comfort, to inflame, to replace physical presence with the suggestion of touch. In Ovid's world, a letter was not passive. It was a living flame. While poets like Ovid imagined love, some Romans wrote it down with sincerity. One of the most touching collections of preserved correspondence comes from Pliny the Younger, a lawyer and statesman in the early 2nd century CE. His letters to his wife, Calpurnia, read not like epic declarations, but like soft murmurs between two people who genuinely liked and loved each other. Pliny writes, "Your letters are just like you, sweet and sincere. They bring me joy when I read them, but also pain, because they remind me how much I miss you." He mentions how she plays the lyre when he is away, how she reads his work aloud, how her presence gives him comfort. He calls her his delight, his joy. This was not the norm. Roman marriages were often arranged. Wives were expected to be dutiful and quiet. But Pliny and Calpurnia hint at something deeper, affection as companionship. Roman men of the upper classes typically married for alliances or lineage. But letters reveal that sometimes affection grew. One fragment from an anonymous Roman man to his wife reads, "Though you were first given to me by arrangement, know that I choose you every morning. You are the warmth in my house and the calm in my heart." Such words, rare as they are, remind us that beneath the layers of duty and decorum, hearts still stirred. Even in a society where women's voices were often muted, their presence, in ink and in memory, lingers. Love in Rome was not confined to scrolls and wax tablets. It was carved into walls. On the stone facades of Pompeii, before the ash fell in 79 CE, lovers left their marks in graffiti. Some are crude, others are poetic. One, in a neat script, reads, "Health to you, my love, wherever you are. You stole my sleep and my appetite, and I do not want them back." Another, scribbled by a hand less practiced, "If you don't love me, I'll still love you. What else can I do?" These are not letters sent, but thoughts left behind, public in form, deeply private in sentiment. Not all Roman love was noble or sanctioned. Enslaved people, forbidden from marriage, often formed deep, lasting bonds. While few of their writings survive, some glimpses appear in burial inscriptions and scratched notes. A simple epitaph for a man named Fortunatus, erected by his lover Prisca, reads, "To my sweet, my treasure, taken too soon. I will speak your name until I join you." Their union may have been unofficial, their rights denied, but the sentiment is unmistakable. Love defied status. Letters between lower status individuals rarely survive. But the tools they used, styluses, writing tablets, have been found in abundance at marketplaces and near army camps. These everyday objects suggest that even the humblest Romans wrote, exchanged, and cherished small messages of the heart. Like today, not every letter received a reply. A letter from a young Roman soldier, found among the ruins of a garrison, reads, "I write again, though you do not answer. I hope you are well, and that your silence is not from anger. I remain, as always, yours." It is a voice suspended in time, hopeful, uncertain. We do not know if the letter was ever sent, but in its words is the ache of every unanswered message. Roman love letters did not always survive as physical objects. Often they were copied into family books, passed down as examples of elegant Latin or models of virtue. Some were even taught in schools. A girl learning to write might copy out the phrase, "I miss you more than sleep, more than figs, more than the sound of lutes at sunset." A boy might practice his Latin grammar with lines from Ovid or a model letter to an imaginary beloved. Even as exercises, these lines carried echoes of real emotion. Some Romans, fearing the loss of paper and ink, carved their feelings in stone. A tombstone from Rome, written by a grieving husband to his departed wife, reads, She lived with me 40 years. Never did we quarrel. She bore our children. She held my hand until the end. Another, etched outside a countryside villa, simply states, "To the wife of my youth. I built this garden for you. May your spirit rest beneath its flowers." These were not letters, but monuments. Yet their purpose was the same, to preserve love against the slow erosion of time. What lingers, after all, is not just the words themselves, but the rhythm of Roman emotion, layered, restrained, yet deeply human. They knew longing. They knew separation. Their letters were vessels of hope, of memory, of presence. They allowed the writer to be near, even when far away. Today, those fragments are enough. A scratch in wax, a brushstroke on papyrus, a chiseled line in stone. Together they speak, "I was here. I loved, and I left these words for you." As we leave behind the columns of Rome and its echoing porticos, we carry with us the letters of its heart, written not in triumph, but in tenderness. And in the next chapter, we shall journey eastward to a land of scholars and moonlight, to the Tang Dynasty, where love was woven not just in words, but in poems, paper fans, and calligraphy. The rustle of silk robes in motion, the soft crackle of ink drying on fine rice paper, a bamboo flute playing faintly. The moonlight bathes the courtyard in quiet silver. Let us travel now to the east, to a time of lanterns swaying in twilight breezes, of mountain mists curling through pine groves. We enter the Tang Dynasty, a time when poetry was the breath of the people, and love was spoken not in declarations, but in verses left on scrolls, fans, and folded slips of silk. From the imperial palace to the humblest tea-house, love in Tang China was refined, introspective, and exquisitely understated. It whispered rather than shouted. It appeared in metaphors, moonlit metaphors, and glimpses behind beaded curtains. This is a world where a single line of poetry could say what 1,000 words could not. A world where men and women, separated by duty or class, reached out to one another across time, through poems left tucked into sleeves or painted on the walls of a tea pavilion. Come quietly now and walk among these silent blossoms. The Tang Dynasty, which flourished from the 7th to the 10th century CE, is often called China's Golden Age, not only for its military and political strength, but for its culture. Here, poetry was not a pastime for the elite. It was a requirement for civil service, a form of spiritual expression, and an expected tool of romantic courtship. Everyone, from emperors to farmers, knew verses by heart. Love poetry, in particular, bloomed during this period. Its elegance lay in restraint. Chinese love poems of the Tang era rarely described the beloved in physical terms. Instead, they spoke of longing through nature, of aching hearts reflected in the autumn wind, or sorrow wrapped in the petals of falling plum blossoms. In this culture of subtlety, desire was wrapped in metaphor. Take, for instance, this couplet by the poet Zhang Zhuling. The moon rises over the sea. We share this moment, though far apart. No mention of touch, no mention of lips or hands, and yet the intimacy is unmistakable. To love someone far away, to gaze at the same moon, and know they are doing the same, this was the height of romantic connection. Poetry allowed lovers to speak of longing without scandal. A woman might write of a distant bird whose cry pierced her heart. A man might describe his sadness as frost gathering on the sleeve of his robe. One of the most famous poets of this age was Li Bai, often called the Immortal of Wine. He lived a wandering life, sailing rivers, visiting temples, falling in and out of favor with the imperial court. And through it all, he wrote. Li Bai's poems, filled with mountains, stars, and the sadness of farewell, often hint at love without naming it directly. Before my bed, the moonlight glows. I wonder if it is frost upon the floor. I raise my head to watch the bright moon, and lower it and think of home. This poem, though often read as patriotic or nostalgic, has also been interpreted as a love poem, a reflection of yearning not just for a place, but perhaps for a person, a presence no longer near. While Li Bai roamed and wrote with passion, Wang Wei, his contemporary, brought stillness and grace to his poetry. A devout Buddhist, Wang Wei's love poems are as calm as a pond untouched by wind. In one quiet verse, he writes, "You ask why I dwell in the green mountain. I smile and say nothing. My heart is at peace. The peach blossoms drift. Water flows away in the deep silence of spring. There is no direct lover here, no partner addressed, and yet there is love in every word. A love of solitude, of beauty, of things left unspoken. In Tang poetry, love is often the space between the words." Though poetry was the highest form of expression, personal letters also carried the weight of affection, especially when written by women whose formal roles in society were limited, but whose inner lives burned with feeling. Women of the Tang dynasty were better educated than in earlier times. Some learned to write in the privacy of their boudoirs or under the tutelage of their fathers and brothers. When in love, they sometimes expressed it in hidden ways, slipping a poem into a lover's sleeve, painting verses onto a fan, or etching a line onto a sliver of bamboo. A preserved love note, copied from a Tang manuscript, reads, "Last night I dreamed of your footsteps in the plum orchard. The snow fell on your shoulders, and I could not reach to brush it away. When I awoke, the window was full of light, but you were not there." The letter is not dramatic. It does not beg. It simply exists as a record of a moment, of a dream that felt real. In the Tang capital of Chang'an, elegant tea houses and poetry salons flourished. Here, courtesans, educated women skilled in music and verse, entertained scholars and nobles. Unlike in later dynasties, Tang courtesans were often revered for their intellect. Their poetry survives, scattered through anthologies, filled with quiet strength. One such poetess, Zhu Dao, left behind hundreds of verses. She once wrote, "You came to me like spring wind through silk curtains, and left without a sound. I hold my inkstone, cold and unused, wondering if your brush will ever return." Her voice is both powerful and restrained. She does not beg. She simply records what has passed, a gentle presence, a sudden absence. In the Tang era, public affection was rare. Men and women did not walk hand in hand or kiss in the open. Instead, lovers met in gardens after dusk, in courtyards veiled by mist, or under lanterns during the Mid-Autumn Festival. One poem, unsigned and anonymous, tells of such a meeting. "He passed beneath my window, his robe the color of cedar bark. I heard the crunch of gravel and turned away, pretending not to see. Even a glance, even the sound of footsteps, could carry the charge of romance." Tang society allowed for flirtation, but demanded it be coded respectful. Poetry was the perfect vessel for that coded passion. No chapter on Tang romance would be complete without mention of Emperor Xuanzang and his beloved consort. Yang Gaifei, a love both celebrated and mourned in Chinese history. Yang was known for her beauty, but also for her musical skill and literary grace. Xuanzang adored her. Their love, however, was blamed for political distraction and ultimately disaster. When rebellion broke out, Yang Gaifei was executed by the emperor's own guards. Legend says he buried her with jasmine and wrote poems in her memory until his death. A line from the Song of Everlasting Sorrow, written in her honor, reads, "In heaven we would be two lovebirds flying side by side. On earth, two trees with branches entwined." Their story became legend, not because it was ideal, but because it captured the fragility of love within power. Tang poetry often ends not with triumph, but with parting. The culture prized restraint, and so even deep passion was wrapped in acceptance of impermanence. A departing lover might write, "Do not walk me past the gate. Let us part at the cypress grove, where the sun does not see tears." There is always the sense that love, no matter how intense, must yield to time, to duty, to war, to the slow fading of memory. But the poem remains. The Tang poets knew that ink, though delicate, could survive what flesh could not. Their letters, poems, and brushstrokes continue to echo. On scrolls tucked in museums, on steles weathered by centuries of rain, on the lips of readers who speak their verses aloud, even today, by candlelight. The flute fades, the moon sets, the brush rests beside an inkstone. In Tang China, to love was not to conquer, it was to wait, to wonder, to leave a line behind, and hope that someone someday would understand. As we leave this world of silk and secrecy, we journey west again to a time of chivalry and veiled devotion. In the next chapter, we shall enter medieval Europe, where love became a code and letters were wrapped in lace and longing. The soft strumming of a lute, the flutter of banners in a warm breeze, hooves upon cobblestone. In the distance, a voice reciting verse in a moonlit orchard. Let us now turn the page of time once more, past the golden calligraphy of Tang China, westward through desert and sea, toward the great stone keeps and cloistered halls of medieval Europe. Here, amidst tapestries and towers, a new form of love began to bloom. It was not the love of marriage or kinship, but something altogether more ethereal. This was courtly love, a devotion often unconsummated, idealized, and veiled in poetic metaphor. It was love wrapped in longing, in rules and riddles. It existed more often in the imagination than in the flesh, and yet it was no less real. In the hush of convent scriptoria, in letters carried by gloved hands across candlelit corridors, in songs drifting from balconies by moonlight, love lived. Come now, let us step into the whispering hush of the medieval world and listen. The concept of courtly love emerged in southern France during the 11th and 12th centuries, in the courts of Aquitaine and Provence. It was a literary and cultural movement, fueled by music, poetry, and philosophy, and by the growing power of noblewomen within the aristocratic courts. Unlike earlier expressions of love, this was not about marital duty or family lineage. Courtly love placed the beloved, usually a noblewoman, on a pedestal. She was to be worshipped, served, honored. The man, often a knight or poet, declared his devotion through songs and letters. He offered loyalty without expectation. Pain was part of the joy, suffering part of the sweetness. The idea was not to possess, but to revere. At the heart of this movement were the troubadours, poet-musicians who traveled from court to court, singing of distant loves and noble hearts. Their verses, written in the Languedoc of southern France, were delicate tapestries of yearning. One early troubadour, Joffre Rudel, sang of a woman he had never met, a distant love whose mere idea filled his heart with joy and sorrow. I love the noble lady I have never seen. For her I sigh and write these lines. Joffre's love was spiritual, idealized, and perhaps imagined. Yet it became legend. According to tradition, he sailed to the Holy Land to see her, and died in her arms upon arrival, a symbol of love pursued to the very edge of life. One of the most influential figures in the history of courtly love was Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of both France and England, and grandmother to a dynasty. Eleanor presided over a glittering court in Poitiers, where poetry, music, and debate flourished. It was here that the concept of l'amour courtois, courtly love, was refined into a literary form. Noblemen composed verses in Eleanor's honor. Poets competed in poetic courts of love, where noble women served as judges of romantic conduct. Eleanor's own daughter, Marie de Champagne, became a patron of Chrétien de Troyes, a writer whose Arthurian romances blended chivalry with emotional devotion, most famously the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. In these tales, love was both ennobling and tragic, a force that elevated the soul that defied society. Courtly love was governed by an elaborate set of rules, collected by writers such as Andreas Capellanus in his 12th century treatise De Amor. Among the rules, love cannot exist within marriage. Love must be secret. The lover must be of lower status than the beloved. Love must be unselfish, loyal, and refined. This system may seem strange to modern ears. Why should love be secret? Why should it exclude marriage? But in the world of the medieval court, these rules reflected real social structures. Marriage was arranged, often cold and political. Love, real love, had to exist outside its bounds. Thus, letters were written not between husbands and wives, but between knights and ladies, between hearts bound by feeling, but not by law. In castles and cloisters, letters passed from hand to hand, sometimes smuggled in books, sometimes delivered by servants, always coded in metaphor. A typical courtly letter might begin with praise of the beloved's virtues, her wisdom, her gentleness, the light in her eyes. Then the writer might speak of his own suffering. Lady, since the moment I beheld you, sleep has fled from me. My heart stirs like the wind in a winter grove. I am yours, though you may never know it. Some letters were filled with verses, others with riddles. The goal was not only to confess love, but to prove wit, subtlety, refinement. The beloved might reply or not. Silence, too, had meaning. One of the most famous true love stories of the Middle Ages is that of Peter Abelard and Heloise. Abelard was a brilliant philosopher. Heloise, his gifted student. Their affair, conducted in secret, ended in scandal, violence, and separation. He was attacked and castrated. She sent to a convent. But their love endured in letters, long, philosophical, aching. In one, Heloise writes, I would rather be your mistress than the wife of an emperor. I followed you into disgrace. And in silence, I love you still. Their correspondence is deeply personal, but also intellectual, filled with questions about love, faith, duty, and sacrifice. Though parted in life, their letters kept their bond alive across years and walls. Medieval art, like its poetry, told stories in fragments and symbols. Tapestries were hung in noble halls, not only to insulate, but to speak of love, loss, and virtue. One of the most famous is The Lady and the Unicorn, a series of woven panels created around 1500. Each panel represents a sense, sight, touch, taste, sound, smell, and perhaps a sixth, the heart's desire. The lady in each panel is poised, self-contained, distant. These images reflect the ideals of courtly love: beauty without demand, serenity in the face of longing. Even within the cloistered walls of monasteries, love found a way. Monks and nuns, sworn to celibacy, sometimes exchanged letters of deep emotional intimacy. These were not necessarily romantic, but they bore the language of love, the longing for connection, the pain of absence, the joy of shared thought. A nun might write to her spiritual companion, "In my prayers, I hold your name like a candle in the dark." In the stillness of monastic life, words became the only touch permitted. In the Middle Ages, lovers used symbolism to speak where words could not. A red rose meant passion, a white rose purity, a blue flower constancy. Exchanging a handkerchief, a glove, or a token ring could signify affection. A lock of hair, kept in a locket or a book, was more intimate than any kiss. Love letters were often wrapped in scent, lavender for remembrance, rosemary for fidelity. Courtly love by design was painful. Its beauty lay in restraint. Fulfillment was rarely possible, nor desired. The suffering lover, loyal, longing, unfulfilled, was the true hero. Poets praised this agony. Better to burn in your gaze than to be soothed by another. For you, my heart is ash, and I would not have it otherwise. This ideal persisted for centuries, shaping how generations understood love. Though the age of troubadours faded, their songs linger. Courtly love shaped Renaissance poetry, Elizabethan drama, and even modern romantic ideals. Its letters, however ornate, speak truths we still recognize: the thrill of first sight, the ache of distance, the dignity of loving without possession. Today, we may no longer address our beloved as my lady or my sovereign heart. But in our own way, we still write, in texts, emails, unsent drafts, carrying forward the same hopes: to be seen, to be chosen, to be remembered. The lute fades, candlelight flickers. A parchment folds and is placed beneath a silk ribbon. As we leave this medieval hall, with its stone hearths and whispered verses, we prepare to enter a new age, one of revolution, salons, and handwritten declarations. In the next chapter, we shall turn our gaze to the Enlightenment, a time of ink and upheaval, and of letters passed between brilliant minds and passionate hearts. The creak of a feather quill across parchment, the soft tick of a mantel clock. Outside, a distant carriage wheel rattles over cobblestones. The scent of melting wax and faint perfume lingers in the still air. The 18th century was a time of contrasts, elegance and upheaval, philosophy and passion, revolution and restraint. It was a century dressed in powdered wigs and velvet, but trembling beneath with ideas that would shake the world. In this age of enlightenment, people wrote not only to reason, but to feel. Letters passed from salon to salon, from chamber to study, crossing borders and barricades. Some carried philosophy, others carried the heart. This was a time when affection was filtered through reason, but never less intense. When expressions of love, though laced with courtesy, burned just beneath the surface. And when the simple act of writing a letter became a quiet revolution of the soul. Let us walk now, gently, into this age of candlelit correspondence and whispered yearning. To understand love letters in the 18th century, we must understand their world. It was a world that prized wit and elegance, where conversations were art, and emotion was best served veiled in metaphor. In France, England, and beyond, salons became gathering places for minds and hearts. Here, philosophers debated liberty and virtue, and lovers exchanged glances beneath the murmur of Voltaire and Rousseau. It was an age of reason, but reason did not silence feeling. Rather, it shaped it into something measured, graceful, and piercingly sincere. The 1700s saw the rise of the epistolary novel, stories told entirely through letters. These books reflected the deep cultural value placed on correspondence. One of the most famous was Julie, or The New Heloise, by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, published in 1761. It told of a passionate love between Julie, an aristocratic woman, and her tutor Saint Preux, a love thwarted by class, morality, and fate. Their letters were not just declarations. They were reflections on nature, God, society, and love itself. Julie writes, "Ah, I could not love you more if I were your wife. And yet I cannot be your wife because I love you so." Readers wept. They saw their own struggles, their own suppressed emotions, in the lettered sighs of these fictional lovers. Voltaire, one of the great minds of the Enlightenment, was also a prolific letter writer. Among his thousands of letters, many were sent to his longtime companion, Émilie du Châtelet, a brilliant physicist and mathematician. Their relationship was intellectual and romantic, and deeply affectionate. In one letter, Voltaire writes, "I love you more than I love truth, and I have dedicated my life to truth." Emily replied in kind, not with flowery phrases, but with wit and intellect, her affection matched by her mind. Their letters show us a love built on equality, on admiration. In a world where women were often silenced, Emily's pen rang clear. Across the Rhine, in Austria, a young composer wrote letters that danced like his music. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, despite his genius, was playful, earthy, and profoundly tender in his writing to his wife, Constanze. His letters include sweet nonsense, childish nicknames, and lines of sudden intensity. "I kiss you 1,000,000 times and hug you as often. Oh, if only I could fly to you right now." Though often whimsical, his words carried the longing of a man often traveling, performing, and aching to return to the quiet joy of his wife's presence. Even as muskets fired and declarations were made, love letters fluttered across the Atlantic. John Adams, future President of the United States, and his wife Abigail exchanged over 1,000 letters during the American Revolution. In these letters, we find political thought, but also warmth, humor, and longing. Abigail writes, "My pen is always freer than my tongue. I write you by the light of the moon, wishing only that it might carry my love to you on its beams." John replies, "My dearest friend, I look for your letters more than I look for victory." Their words remind us that history is not made only on battlefields, but also in bedrooms and parlors, in the hands of women and men who waited, worried, and loved. As France tore itself apart in the 1790s, letters became both lifelines and legacies. Marie Antoinette, imprisoned and awaiting execution, wrote her final letter to her sister-in-law, "I die in the Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman religion. I embrace my children with all my heart. Let them never forget their mother." Though not romantic, the letter is filled with love, quiet, unshaken. Her script trembled, her paper stained, but her voice did not falter. Others, too, wrote from prison cells, lovers torn apart by ideology, separated by walls and time. Their letters, hastily smuggled, often unsigned, carry the urgency of those who know the clock is running out. The 18th century often disguised passion behind polish. Letters might begin with phrases like, "Permit me, madam, to express." But beneath the formality lay deep feeling. In one preserved letter from a Parisian nobleman to a young widow, the lines read, "Though I know my affections are uninvited, they are not unmeant. I offer them not as a demand, but as a gift, one you may return unopened if you wish." No fevered pleas, no overwrought metaphors, just sincerity, folded in courtesy. Though women had fewer rights, their voices were not absent. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, an English aristocrat and writer, corresponded widely and boldly. In one letter to a lover, she wrote, "I would rather live on your letters than on the bread of 1,000 courts." Her lines are sensual without impropriety. She does not plead, she chooses. Elsewhere, a letter from an unknown Frenchwoman to her betrothed reads, "If you love me, tell me so. If you do not, burn this letter. But do not pretend, not to me, not with ink." These women, known and unknown, remind us that the heart needs no permission to speak. Love letters in the 18th century were physical objects of beauty. Laid paper was handmade, textured, often watermarked. Ink was iron gall, dark and enduring. Sealing wax bore initials. Some letters were scented with rose water or lavender, carefully folded and tied with ribbon. Privacy was not guaranteed. Letters were often intercepted, read aloud in salons, or lost in transit. Yet lovers wrote anyway, perhaps because they had no other way to be heard. One woman's note to her lover concludes, "If this letter finds you, know that my heart went with it. If it does not, then may the wind know I tried." Some letters were never sent. Some were tucked into drawers, folded into diaries, burned in fireplaces. An unsigned letter found in a London attic, dated 1799, reads, "I cannot write to you, and so I write to you. These are not words for your eyes, but for my own sanity. I love you. I should not, but I do." Such confessions, too tender or forbidden to be shared, were part of the inner life of many in the Enlightenment, a time when the mind ruled, but the heart still bled. By century's end, the world had changed. Kings had fallen, nations had risen. And love, once the guarded privilege of the noble, was becoming a universal right. Literacy was rising. Mail systems were improving. Ordinary people began to write what once only nobles dared. But even as the world shifted, the essential gesture remained the same. To take up a pen, to place thoughts on paper, to send a part of oneself across space. The quill is set down. The ink dries in silence. A candle gutters low in the glass. As we leave this century of revolution and restraint, we step into the 19th, an age of growing intimacy, of romanticism and repression, of love letters pressed between novels and lace. In the next chapter, we shall find ourselves among the hearts of the Victorian world, where emotion was wrapped in etiquette, but still dared to speak. The slow echo of boots across stone. A distant bugle call fades into twilight. The crackle of fire in a field encampment. Pages rustle beneath a soldier's calloused fingers. The night breathes in silence. ... In war there is noise, cannon fire, drums, the shouted orders of men in motion. But in its quiet spaces, war gives way to something else. Stillness, distance, the ache of waiting. And it is in that silence, when uniforms are unbuttoned, when rifles are laid aside, that letters are written. In the era of Napoleon Bonaparte, when armies marched from Cairo to Moscow, and nations rose and fell like dominoes, love did not cease. It traveled too, tucked into satchels, hidden in boots, folded into the hems of dresses. The love letters of the Napoleonic era are some of the most intimate on record, not because they are ornate, but because they are honest. They were written not in the safety of parlors, but by candlelight on the edge of battle. They speak not only of love, but of fear, of longing, of fragility. Tonight we read them slowly, not with haste, but with reverence. We begin, fittingly, with the most famous love story of the era. Napoleon Bonaparte, the formidable general and eventual emperor, was known for his strategic genius. But in his letters to Josephine de Beauharnais, we see something else entirely: vulnerability. He wrote often, urgently, and without restraint. His words, preserved across time, are filled with contradiction, need, anger, devotion, and jealousy. From one letter, dated December 1795, "Since I left you, I have been constantly depressed. My happiness is to be near you. Ceaselessly, I live over in my memory your kisses, your tears, your affectionate solicitude. The charms of the incomparable Josephine kindle a continual and burning flame in my heart." And later, after not receiving a reply, "You do not write to me. You do not love your husband. You know the pleasure your letters give him, and you do not write one line. Josephine, Josephine, remember what I have said to you. Nature has endowed me with a strong and decided character. It is not in my power to not love you, nor to love you only in moderation." He signs with fire, but also with fatigue. In some letters, he is the great commander. In others, a man lost without her. And though their marriage would end, fractured by time, betrayal, and political necessity, the letters remain, human, complex, eternal. While Napoleon's letters fill history books, countless other soldiers wrote without fanfare. Young men conscripted into his Grande Armée, leaving behind families, lovers, wives. Many were barely literate, but still wrote in simple phrases, with crooked spelling and hearts laid bare. From a French soldier to his fiancée in 1806, "My dear Estelle, today we marched for 12 hours. I can no longer feel my feet, but in my breast pocket I keep the ribbon you gave me. I take it out at night to remind myself there is warmth in the world. Pray for me. I will write again when I can." And another, from a soldier wounded near Austerlitz: "I am alive. My leg is gone, but my heart beats only for you. If I return, it will be on crutches, but I will return. And if I do not, know that your name was the last word I spoke." Such letters were not composed with elegance, but they carried the weight of survival. They were written with trembling hands, often in the final hours before battle. They were hidden in uniform linings or entrusted to comrades. Sometimes they arrived, sometimes they never left the mud. All soldiers wrote from camps, so too did those left behind. Wives, sweethearts, mothers, often waiting for months without word, the silence itself becoming unbearable. A letter from a woman in Bordeaux to her absent husband, 1808. "Jean, the apple tree bloomed too early this year. I thought of you when I saw it, how you always shook the branches to make its snow petals over our heads. The house is quiet, too quiet. I speak your name sometimes into the window, just to hear it aloud. Come home. This is not grand poetry. It is everyday affection. And yet, it reaches us across centuries. Soldiers often lacked proper writing tools. Letters were penned on scraps of linen, backs of maps, even pages torn from military manuals. Ink was made from soot and water. Seals were made of wax, or sometimes none at all, just a fold and a prayer. One officer, writing from Spain, noted, "I have written this by lamplight on a crate. The rain seeps through the roof of our post. The paper is wet, the ink runs, but what matters is that it carries my love. May it reach you like a kiss in the dark." These letters, even when barely legible, were passed from hand to hand, down roads lined with war and across rivers swollen with frost. They traveled slowly and with hope. Not all letters were between lovers. Many spoke of familial love, of friendship, of bonds deeper than blood. From one soldier to his younger brother, "I have no advice to give you, except to love deeply. Life is shorter than we think. I have seen men die with regrets still on their tongues. Write letters, say what you feel. Do not wait. In war, the heart opens, because it must. Because the future is no longer promised." Love letters were also used for codes. In espionage, messages were hidden in the spaces between affectionate lines, invisible ink written over declarations of longing. A seemingly mundane line, like, "The candle has burned low, but I cannot bear to extinguish it. It reminds me of you," might mask details of troop movement or encrypted commands. Even in war, love became the cloak behind which secrets moved. Not all letters reached their destination. Many were found in the pockets of the fallen, folded against the heart, unopened, unread. From a letter recovered at the battlefield of Borodino, Russia, 1812. "My beloved, if you are reading this, then I am no longer in this world. Do not mourn too long. I lived loving you. I died loving you. That is enough." Some families kept such letters locked away for generations. Others buried them with the fallen. A few have survived, weathered and delicate, now held in quiet museum drawers. Each one is a whisper of life amid death. For those who survived, letters became memorials. Veterans wrote to the families of their fallen friends, often describing final moments with gentle grace, even if the truth was too cruel to recount. One such letter reads, "He spoke your name before he closed his eyes. There was no pain. He smiled at the sky. You were in his thoughts. You were his peace. Whether this was true or not hardly mattered. The gesture itself was a form of love, one person carrying the emotional weight for another." Though fewer of her letters survive, Josephine also wrote to Napoleon. Her letters are less flamboyant, more restrained, but they carry quiet strength. In one she writes, "You speak of fire, I speak of embers, but it is not lesser love, only steadier. Come home not as a conqueror, but as my husband, and I shall meet you not with glory, but with open arms." Her tone is mature, maternal, enduring. She loved him, even as their marriage strained and broke. Her letters were less often quoted, but they remain steady as stone. By 1815, the Napoleonic Wars ended. The emperor was exiled. Borders were redrawn. The cannon fell silent. But the letters, they endured. Preserved in attics, pressed between pages of books, tucked into embroidered boxes. These slips of paper survived not because of politics, but because they held something more fragile and more eternal. Feeling, humanity, hope. The campfire burns low. A letter is folded. A sigh escapes into the quiet field. We leave this age of iron and ink, of passion written in haste, of love cradled in danger, and turn to the century ahead. A world of strict manners and repressed emotion awaits us. But within its corsets and codes, the heart will still find ways to speak. In the next chapter, we step gently into the world of the Victorians, where every word was weighed, and every letter a careful balance between longing and decorum. A faint tick of a grandfather clock. A fire crackles in a sitting room. The rustle of crinoline. Pen dips into a crystal inkwell. Somewhere, a piano plays in a distant room. The 19th century arrived not with a flourish, but with quiet resolve. It was a time of order, manners, and moral weight, of tightly laced corsets and precisely folded handkerchiefs, of handwritten notes passed discreetly, each word measured, each glance a paragraph in silence. And yet beneath all this restraint, the Victorian era was rich with feeling. Its lovers may not have shouted. They may not have embraced openly in the street or spoken with the candor of revolutionaries. But in their letters, their hearts were as open as any in history. Theirs was a world where love was encoded. And a single phrase, "I remain yours, faithfully," could speak volumes. Let us slip now into a dimly lit parlor, sit beside the lace-curtained window, and read what they left behind. Victorian society was shaped by rules. From how to walk, to how to dine, to how to greet a guest, every gesture carried meaning. So too did every letter. Love letters in this era followed strict formats. Carefully constructed openings, formal closings, layers of nuance and implication. To be too forward was to be improper. To be too cold was to be cruel. A young man could not simply declare love. He might instead write, "Since our last meeting, my thoughts have been uncommonly occupied." To which a woman might reply, "I trust your thoughts are of pleasant nature, as mine have certainly wandered in similar directions." Beneath the surface, hearts raced, but they were sheathed in silk and sealed with wax. The Victorians gave rise to floriography, the coded language of flowers. Every bloom had a meaning. To send a bouquet was to compose a message. Red rose, passionate love, lily of the valley. Return to happiness, forget me. Not remembrance, camellia. Admiration and longing, violet. Modesty. A note might read only, "Enclosed is a violet and a single red rose," and the recipient would understand everything. Often, dried flowers were pressed into letters, hidden between folds of paper, or sealed beneath a wax crest. The scent lingered long after the words were read. A Victorian love letter was more than its contents. It was a physical object of beauty. Paper was often embossed or bordered with delicate patterns. The handwriting, looping, deliberate, and slanted, was as expressive as the words themselves. Letters were folded carefully, often with intricate techniques, diagonal creases, trifolds, and tucks that concealed the message within. Some folds were meant to be opened only by the recipient. If broken, the intimacy was lost. Seals of colored wax denoted mood. Red for passion, blue for constancy, white for purity, black for mourning or solemnity. The act of writing, folding, and sealing a love letter was a ritual, as meaningful as the words within. Few Victorian love stories are as cherished as that of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning, two poets who fell in love through letters. Elizabeth, reclusive and unwell, had already published widely when Robert wrote to her in 1845, "I love your verses with all my heart, and I love you too." Thus began a correspondence of nearly 600 letters exchanged in secret, for Elizabeth's father opposed all courtship. In one letter she replies, "You have touched me more profoundly than I thought even you could have touched me. My heart is full." Their letters overflow with admiration, poetry, and longing. Each line is both a confession and a negotiation, a balancing act between the rules of society and the pull of love. Eventually, they eloped to Italy, where Elizabeth lived freely for the first time. But their letters remain, capturing the breathless unfolding of love written line by line. The Victorian Empire stretched across continents. Lovers were often separated by oceans and months. Men posted to India, Africa, or the Pacific wrote letters home from ports and jungles. Women at home waited for weeks or years, uncertain if their words would find their beloveds. From a naval officer to his wife in 1857, "Each morning I think of you as the mist lifts from the water. Each evening I dream of the sound of your voice among the gulls. This ship carries my body, but you carry my heart." And from a woman in Yorkshire to her absent fiancé, "I watch the sky each night, wondering if the stars above you are the same. I count them, though I do not know their names. In their silence, I think I hear you." Distance deepened feeling. The weight became part of the love itself. Some letters were never intended for the recipient. They were written in diaries, kept in boxes, or hidden in the folds of dresses. A widow, after years of marriage, might write to her late husband, "Today the rose bloomed again by the gate. You planted it with your bare hands. I watched it open as though you were still here, whispering its name." Or a woman denied by circumstance might pen an unsent line, "I write not to you, but to the feeling." It asks for no reply. Such letters were balm for the heart, a private form of keeping love alive, even when it could not be returned. The Victorian age was not kind to those who loved outside the lines, across class, across gender, beyond the approval of society. And yet they wrote. Secret lovers used coded phrases, initials, and shared metaphors. Even the act of sending a letter required ingenuity, often via trusted servants, hidden compartments in books, or within innocuous notes. From one woman to another, 1874. "My dearest friend, I dreamed last night of the garden where we once sat. The sun dappled through ivy. I recall your hand brushing mine as we reached for the same blossom. If you remember that day, say so in your reply. If not, I shall say no more." Such letters were tender acts of resistance, small revolutions of the heart against the rules of the day. Victorian lovers often stored letters in secret, between the pages of Bibles, beneath floorboards, inside lockets. Some were found years later, yellowed and fragile. One letter, discovered inside a book of Psalms. "Though we may never meet again, I walk each day with the echo of your voice. Your name is my morning prayer." Another, found behind a fireplace during renovations in Sussex. "I stood beside the hedge where we last parted. It has grown wild, as has the space you left behind. Each one is a trace, a fingerprint of love left behind." In the Victorian age, dying declarations were often made by letter for those who could not be present. From a man dying of illness abroad, "By the time this reaches you, I may be gone. but do not dress in black. Do not weep too long. Instead, place this letter where you can read it once a year. And know that in some corner of the stars, I am still loving you. These letters became relics, tied in ribbons. Read by candlelight on anniversaries, held against chests in moments of grief. They were not just paper. They were memory made tangible. Though the Victorians were often caricatured as cold or repressed, their letters show a different story. They remind us that still waters run deep. That feeling, when compressed by etiquette, becomes even more potent. That a restrained voice can be more powerful than a shouted confession. To read a Victorian love letter is to feel a heartbeat beneath the lace. The clock chimes the hour. A letter is folded, tied with a ribbon, and placed in a drawer. As we leave behind the shadowed corridors of the 19th century, we step forward into a world torn by war, where love, once folded delicately on scented paper, will now be written in trenches and in telegrams. In the next chapter, we will hear voices from the front lines, lovers riding across oceans and battlefields, seeking hope in a world on fire. The low hum of distant artillery, a rustle of pages beneath candlelight, a soldier's voice reading softly, rain on canvas. The heartbeat of two hands touching only through ink. In times of peace, love letters are soft things, passed between strolls and dances, kept between novels and perfume. But in war, a love letter becomes something else. It becomes survival. It becomes faith in the future. It becomes the only bridge between two hearts separated by miles, by oceans, by history itself. In the two great wars of the 20th century, letters were a lifeline. They carried hope and memory, grief and courage. They were read under gaslight in foxholes and by firelight in kitchen homes. Each letter was a whisper in the dark. I am here. I still love you. I am still alive. Let us slow our pace now and walk gently through these years. From trench to telegram, from ink-stained uniforms to ribbon-bound replies. These are not grand stories. They are fragments, but each fragment glows with love. During World War I, over 2 billion letters were sent and received by British soldiers alone. Across Europe, millions more passed between men in uniform and the families they left behind. Letters were censored, read by military authorities, often delayed, but they came, folded neatly in khaki jackets, clutched in trembling hands. Some letters arrived months late. Some never arrived at all. But the act of writing, of imagining the other reading, was in itself a balm. A British soldier wrote to his fiancée in 1916, "Each night I picture you reading this by the fire. I see your fingers running along the edge of the page, and it warms me better than any blanket." This was the quiet miracle of letters. They made two people, in two worlds, share one moment. Life in the trenches was cold, wet, loud, and frightening, but soldiers still wrote. By candle ends, in mud-soaked dugouts, on scraps of paper scavenged from ration boxes. They wrote during lulls between shell fire. Some wrote just before going over the top. A Canadian infantryman in 1917 writes, "My darling, the ground shook again last night. We lost 3 in the next unit. I watched the sun come up through smoke and thought, if I make it, I will marry her with these hands. Until then, I am yours, body and heart." These letters were not poetic, but they were honest, pulsing with the immediacy of life and death. Back home, wives, mothers, sisters, sweethearts waited. Each letter that arrived brought joy and relief. Each day without one brought fear. A young woman from Devon writes to her husband in 1915, "I hung the laundry today and thought of you. How you always teased that my arms weren't strong enough. They are now. I carry us both." And from a mother in Amiens, "Write when you can, even if it's only one word. Even if it's only your name. Let me see it and know you still exist." Love during war was patient. It had to be. Many soldiers wrote a final letter to be delivered only if they did not return. These were kept in breast pockets or entrusted to chaplains and comrades. From a 19-year-old British soldier before the Somme, "Mum, if this is the last you hear from me, know I wasn't afraid. I thought of you. I thought of the apple tree in the garden. I thought of Anne and how her hair smells in the sun. I die having loved." Some of these letters were never sent. They were found in the mud, in pockets, folded into prayer books. And some are read today, centuries later, as echoes of boys who grew old only in memory. During both world wars, prisoners of war also wrote letters when they were allowed. These letters were censored, heavily delayed, and often brief, but they carried everything. From a POW in Germany to his wife in France, "My dearest Marie, I have received your 2 letters. I read them every night, even though I know them by heart. The smell of them, the feel of the paper, it is you. I remain whole because of you. Even in captivity, love endured." When World War II began, the world had changed. Radios and airplanes, motorcars and motion pictures. But the letter remained sacred. From 1939 to 1945, millions of letters passed through military postal systems, often handwritten in pencil, sometimes typed, always cherished. A U.S. airman wrote from the Pacific, "I saw a flower I didn't recognize today. It reminded me of your perfume, not the scent, but the feeling it gives me. I wanted to bottle that moment and send it to you." These letters were read and reread, then folded carefully and placed in shirt pockets, bedside drawers, or under pillows. During World War II, American soldiers used a system called V-mail, short for Victory Mail. Letters were written on standardized forms, photographed onto microfilm, shipped, then reprinted back to paper. It saved space, but limited length. Still, love adapted. One V-mail from a U.S. soldier reads, "Dearest, if I had more room, I'd tell you how the sky looks tonight. But know that I'm under it, thinking of you." Love shrank to fit the frame, but it didn't vanish. Women also served as nurses, codebreakers, pilots, and wrote letters filled with quiet strength. A British nurse in North Africa wrote to her husband in 1943, "Today, I held a boy's hand as he passed. He asked if his mother would be proud. I said yes, and meant it. When this is over, I want to come home, sit by the fire, and forget how much I've seen." Their letters bore witness to war, but also offered comfort, humor, tenderness. Though rarely spoken aloud, same-sex love also traveled in ink. These letters were coded, subtle, written as between friends, often with terms of affection too delicate for authorities to question. From one man to another in 1944, "Your last letter came during a storm. I sat in my tent and read it 3 times. The way you write 'old friend' makes me ache. If I return, let's never be apart again." These hidden loves, often suppressed, still pulsed with quiet devotion. From a Soviet soldier at Stalingrad, "To my wife, I do not know if this letter will find you, but writing it makes me feel less alone. The snow is deep. The night is long, but I carry you always in my breath. It was never delivered. It was found in a coat pocket, buried in ice. It rests now in a museum, still sealed. For those who returned, letters became bridges to rebuild love. And for those who did not, letters became memorials, read aloud, wept over, tucked into folded flags. A woman in 1946, reading her late fiancé's last letter. He wrote to tell me about the moon that night, that he missed my laugh. I read it every year on his birthday, because when I read his words, he lives. In this way, letters carried on the lives that war tried to steal. Some say letters died with the digital age, but perhaps that's not true. A handwritten letter is still a miracle, a thing made by hands, shaped by breath, carrying the scent and rhythm of its author. In wartime, it was the only connection, a thread across continents, a hope inside an envelope. And though wars have changed, the longing that birthed those letters remains. We write, we wait, we remember. The candle burns low. A letter is folded slowly. Rain taps the windowsill like a soft, steady typewriter. In our final chapters, we shall watch as love steps into the modern world, from the sparks of early airmail to the glowing screen of the present day. But the heart remains constant. It still waits at the mailbox. It still holds a page to its chest. It still whispers, "Write me soon." The hum of a post office fan, the clack of a typewriter. A mailbox creaks open. Somewhere, a suitcase latches shut. An airplane roars overhead, a silver bird carrying a paper heart across the sky. In the glow of a new century, love moved faster, by train, by telegraph, by telephone. It became easier to reach someone, to speak in real time. And yet, the love letter endured. From the jazz-soaked 1920s to the quiet hush of post-war recovery, from student dormitories to seaside resorts, lovers continued to put pen to paper. But now, they added something new, airmail. Letters no longer crept across the earth. They flew. Folded pages with foreign stamps arrived in days rather than weeks. With every envelope sealed in blue and red borders, the world grew smaller and hearts closer. This was love, suspended in the space between ink and aviation, silence and song. A time when people still wrote, even as the world whispered, "Hurry." First introduced in the 1910s, airmail became widely used by the 1930s and 1940s. Envelopes were slim, light, designed for speed. Young couples, separated by studies, work, or wartime service, embraced this new rhythm, waiting not weeks, but days for a reply. The famous Par Avian label became a symbol of romance itself. A letter from New York to Paris in 1952. My darling Elise, it is strange. We speak on the phone. We send telegrams. And yet this page, with your name at the top, feels the most real. When you read this, know that it crossed clouds and oceans just to rest in your hands. I love you. That doesn't change, whether whispered, spoken, or sealed in airmail. Technology may have accelerated the pace, but it could not replace the warmth of paper passed from palm to palm. The 1920s roared with energy. Flappers, dance halls, cigarette smoke, laughter behind closed doors. Yet even amidst this revelry, love letters retained their place. They grew wittier, more daring, but always human. A letter from a flapper to her jazz pianist lover. I danced until my feet screamed, but still I thought of you. That crooked grin, the way you tip your hat. If I could trap that in a bottle, I'd keep it on my nightstand. And his reply, you call me trouble, but I know better. You're the song I play when no one's listening. This was love infused with rhythm, bold, fast, but still deeply sincere. As education expanded, young people exchanged letters across university dormitories, separated by cities and states. A young man at Oxford writes in 1938, your last letter smelled of lilacs and ink. I read it 3 times during Chaucer. I don't remember what the professor said, but I remember every word you wrote. In these years, love letters became playful, filled with marginal doodles, ticket stubs, even pressed petals. They reflected a generation both freer and more aware of the fragility of time. After the devastation of World War II, letters took on new depth. Survivors, civilians and soldiers alike, used them to reconnect, to recover, to begin again. A woman to her husband, 1946. The war is over, but I still wake at night waiting for your letters. I still check the post box, even though you sleep beside me now. I think part of me will always listen for the rustle of paper before the sound of your voice. And from a man rebuilding a life in Berlin, I found a pen in the rubble. It still works. With it, I write to you, proof that something beautiful can survive what was broken. The letter became a tool not only for love, but for healing. By the mid-20th century, telegrams allowed for urgent messages. Telephones brought real-time voices. But both lacked one thing: permanence. A letter, by contrast, could be read again and again. One telegram might say, "Love you, stop arriving Friday, stop." But a letter, sent the same day, might say, "I stood on the platform today and imagined you running down the steps. You'd forget your bag, as always, and I'd be waiting with the same foolish grin. Come back to me." Even when quicker methods emerged, the letter offered something irreplaceable: intimacy and pause. With globalization and new careers, many couples lived apart for months or years. The long-distance love letter grew into a genre of its own. A woman working in Tokyo writes to her husband in Chicago, 1965, "You are 11 hours behind me, but I feel you in every tea ceremony, every quiet moment. I light incense for you." Does the scent cross time zones? Their connection is felt not in touch, but in attention. Writers, journalists, and clerks brought the typewriter into the love letters world. Some wrote in haste, others with great care, correcting misspellings, aligning margins, retyping entire pages to ensure neatness. A Parisian writer in the 1950s, "I've typed this 3 times now, because I cannot bear to send you anything imperfect. You deserve only clean ink and steady hands. I am trying." The letter becomes a performance of affection, a crafted act of devotion. Some letters came too late. A letter from a man on a doomed passenger flight in 1963, written to his wife, but recovered unopened. This may be nothing, but if it is something, know that you made everything worth it. I don't want you to remember how I left, but how often I returned. The envelope was never broken, but his words live, quiet as breath. The 20th century saw migrations, exiles, and refugee crises. Families separated by war, politics, or poverty sent letters that carried not just love, but hope. From a Cuban mother to her daughter in Florida: "I have placed one of your baby shoes in my drawer. I take it out when I miss you too much. I cannot kiss your cheek, so I kiss this tiny shoe instead. These letters spoke not of romance, but of the love that survives distance and powerlessness. An aerogram, a single lightweight sheet folded into an envelope, became a favorite of travelers, immigrants, and distant lovers. No photos, no enclosures, only words. From a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa, I have no new news. Just the same old ache. I see sunsets and wish you were in them. Please write soon. My soul gets thirsty. The aerogram was the voice of the wanderer, thin, light, yet dense with meaning. Even as society evolved, there remained lovers who could not be seen together. One man to another in 1972, San Francisco. We walk past each other on the street and pretend. But in this envelope, we are real. I love you. I'm not ashamed. Even if I cannot say it aloud. Here, the letter becomes a mirror, one that reflects a truer self than daylight can afford. Some lovers exchanged hundreds of letters before ever meeting. Pen pals, language partners, soldiers and nurses. In these pages, they built entire worlds. From a woman to a man she had never seen. I know the sound of your thoughts better than your voice. I have loved you with the intimacy only paper allows. If we meet, I hope I am not a stranger. And from him, I fell in love with your margins. The way you loop your Y's, the way you leave space between thoughts. No one else does that. These were not just love letters. They were love itself, in its most distilled form. Even as email arrived and phones became cordless, letters were kept in shoeboxes, in drawers, in closets above the coats. A widow writes in 1989, I found your letters today. I read the one where you called me brave. I am trying to be. I folded it again. It still smells like the house we built. No technology, no advancement, no progress can erase the tactile comfort of a letter held close to the chest. The typewriter fades. An airplane crosses the night sky, its lights blinking softly. A woman ties a bundle of letters with thread, then tucks them gently into a shoebox. We leave this chapter with the knowledge that even as the world grew faster, smaller, louder, the love letter found ways to whisper. And now we step into the present, where emails replace envelopes and voice notes stand in for ink. But in our final chapter, we'll ask, is the love letter truly gone? Or has it simply changed shape? The soft tap of fingers on a keyboard. The ambient hum of a smartphone charging. A blinking cursor waits on an empty screen. Somewhere, the whoosh of a message being sent echoes like a sigh across the internet. The world has changed. Paper fades. Pens dry. The mailbox on the corner is visited less and less. We no longer wait for weeks to hear a reply. Seconds now carry messages that once took months. And yet, love remains. It lives now in inboxes and unsent drafts, in voice notes and emoji-laced texts, in midnight confessions typed and deleted. The love letter has not vanished. It has transformed, shifting from folded parchment to glowing screens, from perfumed stationery to softly glowing pixels. But whether written in ink or typed into the void, one truth remains. We write because we love. Let us pause here at the edge of the present moment and listen. Even now, a digital whisper stirs. A message meant for someone, sent or unsent, read or unread. In the early days of the internet, email felt like magic. You typed a message, clicked send, and somewhere across the world, a heart beat a little faster. For a university student in 1997, Your name popped into my inbox this morning, and the entire room changed color. I didn't know I could miss someone so completely just by reading a subject line. Emails became love letters with timestamps. Some were long stream of consciousness reflections. Others were simple. I miss you. Write back soon. But always, they were attempts at closeness, typed across distance. And yet, for every message sent, many remain unsent. Saved in draft folders. Or written, deleted, rewritten, never shared. These are the letters we never sent. Not out of cowardice, but because we couldn't quite find the courage. Or the timing. Or the ending. From one such unsent message, I typed your name 5 times and erased it. I don't know what I want. Only that I wanted to write something that made you feel less alone. If this stays in drafts, at least I've said it somewhere. Sometimes the act of writing is enough. Modern love often lives in silence, broken only by a flicker of 3 dots. Typing, and then nothing. A message erased. A thought reconsidered. A heartbeat suspended. From a text never sent, I was going to say I love you. But then I thought, what if you only like me a little? So instead, I'll ask how your day was. And hope you hear everything I meant underneath. In the age of instant communication, we say less, but we feel just as much. For some, love slips into voice notes. A whispered message at 1:12 a.m. sent into the dark. From a late-night voice recording. I know I said goodnight already, but I remembered the way you laugh, and I couldn't sleep without telling you. So, yeah, sweet dreams. The intimacy of a voice, even recorded, still carries warmth. Still says, I'm here. Today, some love letters are posted openly. Instagram captions, Twitter threads, TikTok tributes, anniversary slideshows set to piano music. They're public, but also personal. Tiny declarations scattered across timelines. A post from 2021 reads, we met through a comment section. Stayed up too late swapping playlists. Now we drink coffee in the same kitchen. I never knew the internet could feel like home. Yet even in this world of exposure, there are quiet corners. Private DMs, archived chats, unread messages from people long gone. Love hides there too. Modern love also ends in letters, typed fast, typed in pain. A breakup message. I didn't want to do this over text, but I knew if I called you, I'd never go through with it. Please know I loved you. I just couldn't love myself enough to stay. Such messages are often cold, but beneath them, grief, confusion, and tenderness linger. In any era, the end of love leaves a shadow. Even humor becomes a form of digital love. Sharing a meme that says, this is so us. Sending a gif of a sleepy panda with the caption, you after 2 meetings. They're not traditional letters, but they are coded affection. They say, I see you, I know you. I thought of you when I saw this. And isn't that what all letters try to do? Phones now store years of conversations. Threads we scroll through. Screenshots we save. A woman in 2022. I found our chat from the first night we met. You said, you're different. I still read that sometimes when I need to feel wanted, even though you don't write me anymore. Digital love is not less real. It is simply less tangible. But its echoes are just as loud. When someone passes away, their messages remain. Some find comfort in revisiting them. Others can't bear to look. A text saved from a departed partner, I'll be home in 20. Want anything from the store? A mundane note. And yet, everything. In this age, love does not die with the voice. It lingers in the cloud, a library of moments frozen in time. Online forums, confessions, and message boards now hold thousands of anonymous letters, some written to lovers never met, some written to those who never loved back. From an anonymous post: "You sat beside me on the train. You asked what I was reading. I didn't answer. I panicked. You smiled anyway. I've written this 20 times and never sent it. But thank you. You made a lonely day feel less heavy." These letters go nowhere, but they still matter. What comes next? Perhaps love will be written or whispered through holograms, woven into neural interfaces. Or maybe we'll return to ink and page, realizing that no screen can hold what a single handwritten line can say. Already, some are returning, to letter-writing clubs, to sending postcards, to mailing poems sealed with wax. Because in the end, even in a digital world, we crave connection that is slow, that asks us to pause, to feel, to write something worth saving. Across the centuries, across the languages and landscapes and technologies, love letters have always been about the same thing: the desire to reach someone, to make them feel seen, to say, "You matter, I miss you, I love you," whether written in ink or typed on a glowing screen. Whether sent or never sent, they leave traces. They stay with us. The screen dims. A phone is placed face down. A hand hovers over the send button, then slowly presses it. Somewhere, a heart softens. And so, our journey ends, not with a grand declaration, but with a quiet message. We have always written to one another, and we always will.